Over the past few days, a lot of people have been comparing these protests erupting across China to the Hong Kong protests, for example, and also to 1989. They say it's the biggest protest movement they've seen on the streets of mainland China for decades. How significant do you think they are?
It's very significant because we haven't seen the kind of protests in the sense that people were demanding democracy, demanding the end of the CCP rule. This is very, very unusual. Protests with specific demands concerning specific livelihood issues, like pollution, like housing issues, happens periodically in China, but not the kind of that outright saying down with CCP. This is first. Second is that this is across the country. Protests in China usually are confined in one location on a specific issue. But this time it's, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Wuhan, in Hangzhou, in Nanjing. And people all linking this unreasonable, abusive, unscientific COVID response to the political system.
As you point out, people in China have been living under these zero COVID restrictions for nearly a few years now. Why do you think that these frustrations have erupted so suddenly at this point?
The pent up anger and frustration have been stewing for 3 years. We all have emotional outbursts. I think, then there's one person who courageously, stand up and said, down with the CCP. Then it resonates with so many people. So people start to chant together. That's how protests happen. That's how movements happen. That's how revolutions happen. It's all spontaneous.
Looking at the past and what have happened to previous movements like this in China, what do you think is going to happen?
I feel very inspired. I also know the history of how brutal the government can go to suppress protests. The ability for people to organize in a sustainable way is really hampered by the government's continuous tighten up repression in the past 10 years. So people can have individual anger and they go to the street out of frustration, a burst of courage. But in order for any movement to sustain, there needs to be organized efforts, and that is very hard to sustain in China.